for joining us. The Prime Minister there, you saw making fun of your push for nuclear power. What do you say to that?
Well, look, the Prime Minister can make as much fun as he likes, but when Australian households are struggling right now because their power bills are going up, they're not laughing. When businesses are looking at closing their door because power prices are too high, they're not laughing. The Prime Minister can get all the giggles he likes from his own rank and file within the Labor Party, but in the real economy, people are hurting. And he had promised people. The Labor Party promised 97 times that they would reduce power bills to the tune of $275 for households. But what we've seen is power prices are skyrocketing, and I'm not seeing anyone in the real economy giggling about that.
All right, I'll get to that in a minute. But we recently had a CSIRO report that found there was no prospect of small modular reactors in Australia this decade, that future cost reductions were possible, but that a small reactor typically costs more than $16,000 per kilowatt hour, and wind and solar came in at 1/8 of that cost. Doesn't that show that the road to nuclear is some way off?
A few things to say about that, Andrew. Firstly, Australia's own agency, including CSIRO, do not do their own assessments at all on nuclear energy. They never have. And that is because nuclear energy is banned from Australia. And there have been a lot of question marks over the Gen Cost report where CSIRO has provided that figure. I personally do not accept it. Secondly, we have 32 countries in the world right now that are nuclear countries. For them, the economics stack up. We've got 50 other countries that are embarking on nuclear programs, seriously assessing it. For them, the economics stack up. The difference between Labor's approach and our approach is they are very selective with technologies. We believe there needs to be a balance. What hits your power bill is the balance of the entire system cost. So the way Labor tries to talk about comparing the cost of creating energy through one source versus another is an absolute furphy. What matters is what hits people's power bills, and that's the entire system. What other countries find is that nuclear actually helps balance up, especially renewables, and costs come down. So this is a debate we need to have in this country, and that's why we're not being shy of it.
Mr. O'Brien, do you want a full-scale nuclear reactor, or are you interested in small modular reactors, or both?
First and foremost, we want a national conversation about the possibility of nuclear energy being part of our mix going forward. Our priority is not the old technology. So anyone who says, you know, what about Chernobyl? What about Fukushima? We hear that. No one wants to see old Soviet-era technology in Australia when it comes to nuclear energy. We are looking at new and emerging technologies. And in the midst of an energy crisis, when we are seeing prices skyrocket, when we're seeing the authorities in Australia saying we're going to have blackouts and brownouts, why wouldn't we consider all technologies, including this one, which represents about 10% of energy across the world today?
Where do you see nuclear reactors being based, in cities?
Ultimately, there are going to be a few options for how we consider nuclear for Australia. You can have on-grid and off-grid. On-grid, one of the suggestions that is being put to us is the possibility of converting old coal-fired power stations into nuclear power stations. Off the grid, there are suggestions of looking at mining sites so that you can have small, almost micro reactors in regional rural areas looking after mining sites. Now, all of these things need to be looked at, and we need to do it in an open way, Andrew. It doesn't matter whether it's a renewables project, a transmission line, or nuclear energy. There has to be a prerequisite here, and the prerequisite is the community comes first. You need a social licence, no matter which major project you're looking at. Nuclear is no different, and that's exactly the approach we'll be taking.
I wanted to ask about gas prices now. Clearly, the government seems pretty exercised on the issue. Even might be a cabinet split on the issue, it seems to me. Should they revise the code of conduct? Was the heads of agreement enough, adequate enough? What's your view on this?
Look, I think the government's botched it. I really do. We were saying from day one in opposition that they need to engage with the gas CEOs and sort this out. Firstly, they refused to do so. The Energy Minister decided to say that the gas trigger was a complete and utter waste of time, only to find the Resource Minister trying to use it 2 months later. The Energy Minister sacked the CEO of Snowy, that looks after Kurri Kurri, the peaking plant for gas, because he didn't like the idea of having more gas in the system. The Energy Minister is trying to take gas out of the potential capacity mechanism. That the whole thing has been botched. Now, we kept prices down when we were in government. Prices were coming down 8% for households, between 10 and 12% for businesses. Australian manufacturers, over 40% of their energy comes from gas. I've been out there, Andrew, on the shop floor. I'm talking to foundries, to steelmakers, that are telling me they might shut their door because of gas prices. And if they do, we know where that business goes. It'll go to the likes of China and India, high-emitting countries. So it's not good for the environment, it's not good for the economy, it's not good for intellectual property, it's not good for our competitive advantage. It's bad news. Industry is struggling, they're on their knees, and the only solution that the Labor Party has come up with is to reallocate gas, not to get more gas into the system. We need more gas, not just a reallocation of it.
Mr O'Brien, just on some of those points you made, I mean, obviously the current government blames the previous government for not doing enough when it came to creating the investment certainty around energy policy. And they say you hit a price rise until after the election, asking the AER to delay that determination on prices. What do you say to those 2 points?
Well, I disagree with both. The government now, the Now government, was very clear all the way up to the election that they had a plan to reduce prices and to keep the system reliable. They have delivered the polar opposite. Of course,
but the AER did delay that determination, didn't they? The AER did delay that determination. Presumably on the behest of the then Energy Minister.
It doesn't matter whether the AER announced the determination early, late. As it always did, it made not one iota of difference as to what the price increase was going to be. Labor made a commitment to the Australian people last December that they would reduce power prices. Now, I don't think it's too much for the Australian people to hold the government to account for that which they promised them. I think we all know the truth. It's a broken promise. They said they had the plans to do it. Now, you know, the war in Ukraine... Yeah,
but if they knew they were going up 10%, would they have... I mean, they might have revised it, mightn't they? They're promising a 10% reduction, not knowing that a 10% increase is being put off.
Well, Andrew, they made the announcement last December. There was no advice at that point about any price increase because that advice comes later on in the next year. And they've had ample opportunity, by the way, to revise it. How many times has Peter Dutton and I asked the Prime Minister in question time whether or not he stands by the $275 decrease? He's never said he doesn't, nor will he confirm it. He can come out today and revise it if he likes.
I'm sure they'll eventually be revising it. I'm sure they'll eventually be revising it. Just on a couple of other issues.
Well, the real economy knows it. Sure.
Just on a couple of other issues. The PM announced this extension to paid parental leave. What's the opposition's view on that?
Well, we'll have to wait to see the full details and the costings. But overall, it looks pretty positive because it builds on our legacy, about which we're really proud, by the way. You know, the coalition at the end of the day saw women's participation at record levels. And we're able to sort of narrow that gender pay gap, which is so critical, and unemployment for women at the lowest level in 48 years. Now, paid parental leave is an important part of that. So long as the government is looking at ensuring it provides a balance for families, a balance so people can look after work, life and caring responsibilities, that's key. Liberal Party is always about choice and about flexibility, so it looks good, but we do need to see the details.
The PM announced there'd be a referendum on an Indigenous voice next financial year. What's your position on this and on the speculation in this morning's papers that the coalition might just allow MPs to have their own views on this, might not have a unified view?
Andrew, it's too early to start talking about whether or not MPs get a free vote. And that is because the Prime Minister has not been clear about what it is we'll be voting on. We've always been very positive about the voice. The problem is the Prime Minister, even in his speech yesterday that Sky just showed, it's just about the vibe of the thing. He cannot tell us how it's going to work. He cannot tell us who's going to be on it. Cannot tell us how they're going to be chosen to be on it. He cannot tell us the powers that would be bestowed on those who are on the body. So it's complete mystery. You cannot go to the Australian people asking for a referendum, asking for constitutional change based on the vibe of the thing. We need to know the detail. In the absence of the detail, he is compromising the very cause that he is trying to promote. And it's too early to say where the opposition would stand on issues for which there's no detail. So,
all right.
Look, it's with the Prime Minister, he's got to stump up with it. Just
finally, what do you think of the prospect of the Treasurer cutting programs in the regions the National Party secured in exchange for the net zero emissions deal?
We know that the government, the Labor government, has a track record of ignoring the regions. Already in the few months they've been in, they have ignored regional Australia. So we'll be watching out for that. Whether it be road projects or rail projects across regional Australia. In my portfolio of energy, we know regional Australia is being ignored by this government. Let's see if they also ignore them in roads and rail. If they do, they'll be held to account. It probably won't surprise some people, but this is what they do. Labor's back, so are taxes, and so are the regions being ignored.
Ted O'Brien, thanks for your time.
Thanks very much, Andrew.